In absentia, Major General David Chilembe, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our assistant commissioners who are here, deputy assistant commissioners, also the border management community that is part of this briefing through visual links. I would also acknowledge the members of the media who are here. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Meme Mokgotsi. I'm the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Communications and Marketing, and I will be facilitating this brief program. We are gathered here on a very successful note in terms of the Border Management Authority's interception, which was supported by various law enforcement authorities and other agencies operating at the ports, including South African Revenue Services, the South African Police Service, as well as other stakeholders. Without wasting any time, I will be inviting the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority. I will be inviting the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Schreiber, to commence with his remarks in the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, members of the media who are joining us here, as well as South Africans. The Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Dr. Michael Masiapato, as well as members of the BMA who are also in the room this morning. Today we are here to provide more information on what is likely the single biggest breakthrough against the drug trade in South African history. Yesterday, 2 days ago, on the 27th of May, the Border Management Authority, working together with the Hawks, SAPS K9 unit, the South African Revenue Service, and other law enforcement stakeholders, intercepted a drug consignment valued at nearly 1 billion rand at the Beitbridge port of entry. What is important to emphasize is that the substance, methaquolone, commonly known as ABBA, that was discovered is a precursor or an ingredient in Mandrax, which means that the ultimate value of this interception is likely far more than the billion rand value assigned to this particular substance. Approximately 713,000 grams of methaquolone was intercepted, and the Commissioner will provide more detail on the interception itself. And this was hidden inside a truck attempting to enter South Africa through the Beitbridge port of entry. Working through intelligence from the BMA's National Targeting Center, the truck was identified and taken into the sophisticated SARS scanner that is on the site at Beitbridge, where it was confirmed that the truck had a hidden compartment. BMA officials then painstakingly worked for no less than 8 hours to dismantle the truck in order to access that compartment, where drugs valued at 998.2 million rand were discovered. What is important to emphasize is that the BMA was not flying blind. It was not a matter of guessing where to look. The work that was done ahead of time meant that the BMA understood this truck had to be looked at, and it then had the technological tools available in cooperation with the South African Revenue Service to do so. 3 suspects have been arrested and handed over to the Hawks with investigations ongoing. I understand, Commissioner, that they are appearing in court this morning. Today, I want to commend every official involved in this operation for their vigilance, professionalism, discipline, and determination. The officials who worked those long hours with focus and determination to secure this breakthrough are exactly the kind of people we need in law enforcement in the Republic of South Africa. But I also want to emphasize that this interception is not an isolated event or a matter of luck. This was not a coincidence. It is the product of sustained reforms that are steadily rebuilding the capability of the South African state to secure our borders and restore the rule of law. This singular breakthrough vividly demonstrates that our investments into intelligence-driven work, modern technology, digital transformation, and building a new organizational culture exemplified by BMA personnel is improving the security environment at our ports of entry. For too long, organized criminal syndicates treated South Africa's border posts as weak points that could be exploited for the trafficking of drugs, illicit goods, undocumented persons, and other forms of transnational crime. That era is coming to an end. And again, it is not by accident. It is because of the meticulous reform work that government is driving every day across the BMA and Home Affairs ecosystem. Since its formation in 2023, it has taken painstaking work to set up the BMA as a new law enforcement entity that creates a single command and control structure at ports of entry. Coupled with that is our focus on digital transformation, which harnesses technology, as we saw again in this bust, to improve intelligence capacity, surveillance, and which is introducing biometric technology for the very first time. Work is at an advanced stage to finalize the rollout of a world-class electronic travel authorization system that will operate on the basis of cutting-edge biometric technology to secure entry and exit processes. As we speak, the BMA is installing sophisticated facial recognition cameras at major airports ahead of the scale-up of the ETA to all countries that require visas for short-stay visits. The ETA has been live for visitors from China, India, Indonesia, and Mexico since October. For the very first time, South Africa now has the capability to digitally verify the identity and biometrics of foreign nationals before they enter the country, significantly strengthening national security and helping to prevent criminal syndicates from exploiting weaknesses in the immigration system. Even at this limited scale, the ETA has already prevented thousands of irregular entries to the country through biometric technology. Yesterday's operation at Beitbridge Port of Entry is clear evidence that our reforms are producing tangible results. We are not saying that the journey is over. We are not saying that the work is complete. But what we are saying is that we are making rapid and meaningful progress. Just think about what this operation means for the people of South Africa. It means nearly R1 billion worth of drugs were removed from our streets. It means that the fuel used by drug gangs was cut off in this instance. It means that the BMA's work yesterday saved countless lives from drug overdoses and from gang violence. That is what it means when we say that we are building a stronger BMA and a stronger law enforcement capacity. And we are not done yet. If these are the type of breakthrough operations that the BMA is already delivering, just think what we will be able to deliver once the ETA is fully scaled up, once we have more drones in the air, once we have more body cameras on our officials than the 40 we already use. This will be complemented by the work ongoing at the Department of Home Affairs, where our digital partnership with the banks is rapidly moving South Africa towards replacing the green ID book once and for all, once all South Africans have access to the more secure smart ID. The green ID book is intricately linked to issues of illegal migration, smuggling, and other offences, because it is the core pathway that is used to commit identity theft. And we are rapidly moving to replace those green IDs. Additionally, our draft regulations to create a digital ID system are out for public comment until the 6th of June, which again will biometrically secure South Africa's population register. Taken together, ladies and gentlemen, all three of these biometrically powered systems, the ETA, the eradication of the green ID book, and the introduction of digital ID, is methodically cleaning up South Africa's population register, is methodically securing South Africa's immigration processes. And when you add in the intelligence work, when you add in the surveillance technology, it is methodically securing South Africa's borders. The message we are sending today is therefore simple and unequivocal. Our country's borders are systematically being secured against organized criminal networks and drug smuggling syndicates. Like I said, we are not there yet. We are not at our destination, but we are rapidly moving in the right direction. And if you doubt that, then yesterday's breakthrough is the single most visible example yet of the rapid progress we are making. Again, I say, imagine if the BMA was not doing this work. Imagine if R1 billion worth of precursor for Mandrax flooded our streets. Imagine if criminal gangs got hold of the drugs that were manufactured using this substance. That is what South Africa was saved from because of the reforms underway at the BMA and across Home Affairs. Over the coming months and years, our focus on building a capable BMA powered by digital transformation is totally reforming our immigration system. We are systematically rebuilding the rule of law at our ports of entry. And I also want to make it clear that our fight against organized crime includes rooting out corruption within our ranks. Since the start of this administration, the Department of Home Affairs has secured 10 criminal convictions, 14 arrests, and 65 dismissals linked to corruption and misconduct. The BMA, in turn, has secured a further 26 arrests and 34 dismissals. Those are the type of officials we don't want and that we are rooting out. But the officials that worked on yesterday's operation, from the targeting center to the officials dismantling that truck over an 8-hour period, they are exactly the officials that South Africa needs in law enforcement. Our job is to empower those kind of officials while uprooting anyone involved in misconduct. Protecting South Africa's borders requires honest and professional public servants, and we remain firmly committed to rooting out corruption and strengthening accountability across those ecosystems. The message to those engaged in transnational crime and smuggling operations is very clear. This interception is just the start, and it is a warning. The capacity we are building at the BMA is rapidly changing the way in which we are able to enforce the law in the border environment. And I am sure that this is not the end of it. The era of porous borders and weak enforcement at border posts is being replaced by a new era of accountability and technology-driven enforcement. I once again commend Commissioner Masiapato. I commend every BMA officer involved in this operation, and I commend our partners in law enforcement who have assisted us. Taking almost R1 billion worth of drugs off the street means the BMA is literally saving lives. Increasingly, the people of South Africa can see the fruits of our reform journey, which is rapidly rebuilding and restoring the rule of law in the border environment. I would now like to give an opportunity to Commissioner Masiapato to take us into greater detail as it relates to yesterday's operation. Thank you very much.
Let me start by acknowledging the presence of the Minister of Home Affairs and the Chairperson of the Interministerial Consultative Committee on Border Management, Dr. Schreiber, as well as the Assistant Commissioners present in the ecosystem, and also all the Deputy Assistant Commissioners that are here, the entire border management community, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I suppose the first thing to start by is just to indicate that the minister had fairly covered the overall picture in terms of what fairly transpired. So my role will just be to give some bit of contextual detail in some of the issues at hand. But the first thing that we want to start by indicating is something that sometimes is not well understood. When we talk about Border Management Authority, in terms of the operational picture, we talk about over, I would say, 9 structures of government. And that is why the Border Technical Committee that oversees the work of the Border Management Authority is over 10 of the heads of government departments as well as government entities. Similarly, the Interministerial Consultative Committee that is chaired by the Minister of Home Affairs is a structure of 10 ministers, and that particular structure is overseeing the work of the border management ecosystem. So when we talk about Border Management Authority and we talk about the work that is being done, it should not necessarily be viewed as a single structure. It is actually a multidisciplinary and multi-focused structure that is all-inclusive in terms of the entire role players in the ecosystem. And sometimes we keep on giving some bit of clarity around that by actually citing some of those critical structures. So in this instance, we just want to appreciate the work that has been done by the team at Beitbridge border post. This was on a Thursday night. One of the things that we just want to amplify is the fact that we have been doing a lot of work building what we call the National Border Targeting Center. So this is supposed to be the brains behind the work of the frontline colleagues on the ground in terms of the work that they do. Exactly as the minister had indicated, we are seeking to create a model through which we do not necessarily work by guesswork, but we work by empirical data that is being fed into the ecosystem by a multiplicity of, I would say, structures, individuals, and the rest of the role players in the environment. And this is exactly what happened in as far as this particular situation is concerned. As the minister has indicated, in terms of the work that is being done in the back end by our team, we are able to actually say that the kind of analytical work that is done in terms of people movement, the analytical work that is being done in the background in terms of goods movement, as well as the work that is done in the background in understanding the nature of the cross-border crimes, it is starting to bear fruit. And this is one of those particular examples, mainly because even as we do our normal inspections, even as we do our normal, I would say, stop and searches in the ecosystem, there are those instances that we basically do those with very clear understanding and very clear knowledge in terms of what is going on ahead of time. So in this instance, indeed, we knew what was actually on the way to the ecosystem, and on that particular basis, we had to be very much ready to be able to do the work. And as the minister had said, when that particular truck arrived on the North Gate, we did every other thing that is meant to be done. As you will know, all of the people that are destined to South Africa, they need to be subjected to port health work in terms of the actual screening. And that was done, and it was found to be successful, meaning that the people within that particular truck passed that particular first screening protocol in terms of them not being, in a way, bringing any kind of a disease within the ecosystem. So on that basis, they had to be allowed into the country. And of course, part of the work that needs to be done, as you will know, immediately after the port health work is the work that actually involves the immigration work. So within that particular environment, we then has to then move into the issue of protocols around whatever that is being carried within the conveyancer, as we call them. And of course, in this particular instance, we basically knew, and that is why we had to make sure that that particular truck then gets subjected to to even further screening protocols. And as the minister had said, the scanning machinery that we actually deployed at Beitbridge, it is something that has been procured by our colleagues in the South African Revenue Service. And on that basis, as a one ecosystem, as I've indicated, we are then able to deploy that particular ecosystem as a collective. And that is why it was then taken through into that particular mechanism. And in that particular instance, obviously, we were able to then identify the compartment wherein the I would say the consignment was fairly hidden. And as the minister is saying, this is a very serious, sophisticated enterprise. This is not some chance takers who just take some things and throw into the truck per se. They literally build it into the truck, and they literally actually seal it with very serious steel and all of those kind of issues. When the minister talks about an 8-hour operation, it was an activity to dismantle that particular compartment ultimately, and we were able to then take out the consignment. And in this instance, we can fairly confirm, as you might have seen the pictures, that we talk about 28 packs or packages that were actually retrieved out of that particular environment. And of course, what we do in those particular instances, because at the port level, we do not have all the expertise. Immediately after we pick up a particular instance, we are able to make the first determination, and on that basis, we then activate the relevant experts. In this instance, as the minister confirmed, we were able to activate the relevant K9 unit that is responsible for dealing with issues of drug identification, but also we had to activate the detectives at the level of the Hawks that deals with these particular matters. And on that basis, as they arrived, we were able to then allow them to take over the crime scene on the basis of doing the rest of the other critical protocols that are required as the law prescribes. In this particular instance, they had to take out the 28 bags and put them on the ground. And I think you've seen the pictures, and arising from that, they had to do other technical work of measuring and all of that. And that is why we can confirm that average-wise, each of those were actually weighing between 25 and 30 kgs. And that is why we talk about over 713,000 grams in terms of the mathematics that goes with it. And on that particular basis, it was very much clear that this is one of those I would say serious bust that has unfolded. The minister has spoke about almost $1 billion in terms of the actual estimated street value, and the actual figure is 998.2 million, which is basically just a few thousand below $1 billion, and that is basically the essence. So on that basis, we can also confirm that there were 3 people that were actually in the truck, and in this instance, we were able to obviously ascertain that the truck is a Malawian registered truck as it arrived at Beitbridge, and of course is transitioned, or it was on transit through Beitbridge, through Zimbabwe as a country. And of course, on that basis, there was 1 Malawian male and there was 1 Malawian woman among the people, as well as 1 Zambian male. And those are the people that the minister had indicated that they will be appearing almost now in Musina Magistrate Court. And on that basis, there will be more issues that will come out. And of course, the NPA as well as the Hawks are driving that process, even in terms of the charging there that relates to issues around drug trafficking, as well as the contravention of various other laws. And of course, the charge sheet will be able to give more detail in as far as that particular part is concerned. Now, we also just want to conclude by indicating that as the Border Management Authority at the port level, we had to officially hand over every other thing to the Hawks for them to be able to take the work further from there. The protocols are very much clear in terms of all of the activities that they need to do. As you will know, being the Directorate for Priority Crimes Investigations in the country, they have a responsibility to do further investigative work, both within our country as well as beyond our borders. So on that basis, they will be able to do the investigative work that will be able to give give us the origins in as far as those particular drugs are concerned, but also do further investigative work that will indicate what was the destination within our country in as far as this part is concerned. And I think one thing that we can fairly remember is the fact that there has been some bust that has been done by the police in some farms within the country where there are illegal labs and all of those. It might be that it was destined to those kind of platforms, but of course the Hawks will be able to give further real answer in as far as that part is concerned as part of the investigative work that is being done on their side. And of course, as the minister had said, as the BMA in the border ecosystem, we continue to advance a zero tolerance in as far as corrupt practices are concerned. And that is why we are able to make sure that when these kind of issues unfold, we are able to come out publicly and be as transparent as possible, so that there is a bit of accountability in terms of the work that has to unfold out of this particular reality, so that there is no any other confusion. We also want to confirm that when we talk about busting that happens, they are all actually a daily occurrence, especially even in terms of general illicit goods across various ports. It's just that we cannot do a publicizing of every other thing, because that is actually a daily work as it unfolds. You will remember just a month ago, we intercepted a lot of explosives, again in Beitbridge. And those ones were coming from Zimbabwe and they were coming to South Africa. And we know those ones are used to explode our cash in transit vehicles in the country. They are also used to explode the ATMs, but also used to explode some rocks underground in terms of illegal mining. So these are some of the things that actually happen all the time. And we can only create this kind of platforms when the interception, or when the, I will say the interception is more critical or is more bigger, that actually warrant a conversation of this nature. But otherwise, as the minister had said, we appreciate all of the role players in the ecosystem that were part of the entire work, and on that basis we are really very much happy about the fact that one interception has actually unfolded, and on that basis we should be able to say is one of the successes in the ecosystem. Thanks.
Thank you to the Minister of Home Affairs as well as the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, highlighting the commendable work that has been achieved through this massive bust, the street value of close to $1 billion. And now this session, I would like to open it for us to engage with members of the media. We will be taking one-on-one questions. And as it is protocol, we request you to please identify yourself and highlight the media house that you are representing before you can pose a question. We'll be starting with questions in the room, and then we will go to the online platforms, because other media are joining us through online platforms and streaming links. So I will be commencing now with the question and answer session. Yes, you can go ahead.
I don't know if it could be idea of where the consignment was headed to. Yes, it was coming from the army to Zimbabwe and into the destination. Were there markings on this consignment, the exhibits? And do we know as to whether the consignment will be kept at a safe storage facility? I mean, we heard of the Mandela Commission about the exhibits that were kept in Shepstone and previously stored. Can you assure some applicants that this won't happen?
Thank you for that. Any other question in the room? Okay, we don't have any questions. Commissioner, Minister.
Thank you for the question, Pule. I think the Commissioner will come in afterwards. But I think it's important to take the opportunity to be clear about the BMA's mandate. The BMA did its job here. Its job is to ensure the secure processing of travelers and goods in the border environment, and to detect where there are anomalies, and then obviously if those anomalies include drugs, to make sure that the people transporting it are arrested, and that the goods are confiscated. But the BMA's mandate does not extend into criminal investigations, the prosecution process, as well as the any further steps that may involve the substance in this particular case. So that is sitting with the Hawks. I think the questions on the specifics of what the team may have sensed or picked up on the ground, the Commissioner will be in a better space to respond to. But I think the question is important because it illustrates the interconnectedness of all these different processes. So, of course, from a Home Affairs perspective, from a BMA perspective, we have to do our bit. And I think we can say with pride that that's exactly what happened yesterday. But we are part of an integrated justice system. And so what we can commit to is the BMA officers have to be available to testify. We have to be fully supporting the Hawks with evidence that was collected on the day. All of those elements we recognize, and the BMA must play that role in supporting the other processes of the integrated justice system as it plays out. But your question is indeed a reminder to all of us that the chain has to be strong. In each one of the links in the chain has to work. And I think that, that is really one of the things we will have to grapple with going forward. But absolutely, from a political perspective and from the BMA's perspective, every part of the work must now be done to ensure successful prosecution, successful managing or destruction, or whatever the ultimate outcome is with the substance. We will support that. But I think it's also incumbent upon all of us as South Africans to support the broader reform in the justice system through all of the interventions we're seeing, including Matlanga Commission, to make sure we emerge with a stronger chain where every link is actually able to function optimally. Commissioner, maybe just some details on the packaging, etc.
No, Pule, in terms of the destination, as I've indicated, that is something that will come out as part of the actual investigation work of the Hawks. And I suppose as they engage, obviously, with the people that are now in their hands, the arrested, possibly they might be able to get some bit of data that will be able to do that confirmation. But I think one thing that is very real, and that is what I had said earlier, is the fact that we have all seen some bit of busts that has been happening within the country by the police in some of the farms where there has been some illegal, drug lapse, as it were. So I suppose on that basis, without necessarily saying that is the fact, but it can be the reality that this was a supply into those kind of platforms for the purposes of those illegal drug manufacturing within the country. And by the way, as we kept on emphasizing, this is the ingredient, but it's actually the top ingredient in as far as the putting together of the Mandrax pill. So on that basis, it could be that it was actually destined into those kind of platforms. And I suppose the investigation by the Hawks will be able to talk to those issues. And by the way, with the work that has been done from here on, further conversations will fairly be driven by the Hawks in terms of a bit of updates and all of that going forward. In terms of the markings within the packaging themselves, on the basis of maybe giving some bit of clues, the report that we know or we have from the teams on the ground, they were fairly just black packaging, literally a black plastic that was basically used in wrapping all of those, and there was no any markings or anything like that. In many instances, if you are to have some element of marking that can give you an indication of the destination, for example, of the consignment or where it is actually coming from and things like that, that is mainly common when we are talking about something legal, but not necessarily something of this nature. So in this instance, there hasn't been any marking that could have given some kind of indication. Now, your third part, the minister has fairly addressed it. From where we sit, The crime scene, as I said, got handed over to the experts, mainly from the Hawks, but of course with the presence of the K9 for the work in terms of the sniffings and all of that. But ultimately everything is now in the hands of the Hawks, and you will know part of what they will be doing is to go to the lab and do some further work. That is why even the estimated value, we talk about street value, because they are still to do further work, and on that particular basis further work can also be able to affirm certain other issues, even in terms of the value and all of those kind of issues. So from where we sit, they know what is supposed to be done, and they know where they're supposed to store them, and they know how to extract exhibits out of that, and they know how they're supposed to create the case docket related aspects. So on that basis, I suppose our colleagues in the Hawks will be able to take those kind of questions forward around the mechanics in as far as all of these issues are concerned. And we don't have any doubt that there might be a confusion in terms of the storage or anything like that. So from where we are sitting, we consider the colleagues as part of the JCPS to be experts in terms of managing the issues ultimately. And by the way, in instances where there has been some element historically that actually compromise certain things because of other corrupt related activities, it does not necessarily mean that is actually the norm. Under normal circumstance, colleagues are on the ground who know what they're supposed to be doing, and they make sure that they actually do the right thing. And that is why we do have convictions relating to issues of drugs, even if there is an instance that has been cited in the Madlaga Commission, but that does not necessarily mean is the norm for every other interception. And in this instance, we are also very much confident that it is not necessarily going to be that one, or in a way being in the wrong hands. We know the officials that have taken over the whole issue. We know the investigative officer and all of that. And from where we are sitting, they will be able to do the right thing as part of the JCPS ecosystem, as the minister has indicated. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Minister. Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have any questions? Any more questions? Is it a follow-up?
Sorry, just want to take this opportunity to ask a separate matter. Mr. Schreiber, the Tegwini mayor urged Home Affairs to relocate immigrants protesting outside German offices. Are you aware of this? This counting the work of what we also heard from the Canadian High Commissioner blaming Home Affairs for the backlog for undocumented nationals. It's just irresponsible.
Thank you for that. Any other question? Do we have questions online?
On the investigation into a past interception in Free State, carrying particularly undocumented. Thanks.
Thank you. I know that we have addressed that matter numerous times, but let me allow the Minister and the Commissioner to respond to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. The situation in Durban, I think, has been largely managed. The first challenge there was to make sure that individuals who were claiming to have status in South Africa are properly verified, and that was done again with the help of technology. It's another signal actually of the direction in which we are going, where I think it was 457 individuals came forward to be verified. And through the use of biometrics, that was done quite efficiently. I think there were about 2 individuals who were found not to have legal status in South Africa, and they are being processed further in accordance with the laws and the procedures. So the vast majority of that initial group is no longer at the facility. But I would just say that, you know, this often happens, unfortunately, Pule, where bylaw issues are placed at the door of Home Affairs as well. And I think we have to be clear that we've seen this thing happening in the past where, you know, perhaps opportunistic individuals who use a situation like this seek to occupy a particular space. And we've seen how that ended up being a huge challenge, for example, in Cape Town, where we are currently in court years later to try and resolve an occupation. So what starts as a Home Affairs verification operation becomes a land occupation or a building occupation. And I think it's important to be very clear that Home Affairs does not enforce the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act, for example. Those are mechanisms that sit with the municipality. So it is critically important that wherever we have people coming forward to access services, Home Affairs must do that work, and that was done in this case. But municipalities must take responsibility for enforcing their bylaws. They cannot seek to escape that work. And certainly in the case of eThekwini, that is exactly what we expect to happen from the mayor and his team there. I think as it relates to the question about the Ghanaians, I think it's very important. Let's not try to dance around the reality that there are many undocumented people in the country. And when we look at some of those flights that left the country, again, the BMA, Home Affairs, on the ground, doing our work, doing our component of what is required. And then we found many people there who did not have legal status to be in South Africa. That's a fact. And so I think we must be guided by the facts on this. I think we mustn't try to sort of divert away from the reality that over many years there are many people who came into this country illegally. And that is the issue that we have to confront and that we are dealing with through exactly the kind of systemic reforms that we were talking about today, as well as the reforms at Home Affairs that really extend across the population register and making sure that we're able to really, for the very first time ever, have biometric information for everyone who's in the country, make sure that our records are updated and that we eliminate things like identity theft that is often used by people who are in the country illegally to obtain services, etc. So that's the reality on the ground. I think we understand that reality, and it would not be correct to sort of try and deviate or divert away from the fact that this is an issue that we have to deal with. Of course, we have to deal with it within the confines of the law. And that is really the important part of our approach to all of this. We have a constitution. We are working to restore the rule of law, including the rule of law in immigration. But you can't restore the rule of law in immigration by breaking the law in other domains. And that's really an important message to make sure that while this work is going on and while this work is critically important of restoring the rule of law in our immigration space, let's guard against other acts which might also themselves amount to undermining the rule of law. So we just want to be consistent. We have to be clear about what our laws require us to do, but certainly the commitment is there, and I think increasingly the examples like the one from yesterday at Beitbridge are tangible evidence of reform working. I emphasize throughout, in conclusion, we are not done. This is not a press briefing to say that the work is complete or that we've arrived at our destination. I think the Commissioner would certainly agree with that. But what we are saying is that more rapid progress is being made on this issue in this particular period than has been made for many, many years before that combined. And we have to be open about that and say that we still have much work to do, but there should be absolutely growing confidence in us reaching our destination of a secure, well-managed and controlled immigration system, precisely because of the daily gains that we see on the ground and that South Africans increasingly experience when they access Home Affairs services in more convenient ways and more secure ways than ever before. Thank Thank you very much.
Yeah, colleagues, let me address the issue raised by Letlohonolo. And maybe let me start by saying this. When I was in Beitbridge yesterday, there was a question from one of the journalists that was relating to the drug bust. And I was saying to him that, no, I am not there for the drug bust issue. I am there for what the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs has described as the border breaches. It was just the fact that when I was driving there was this success, and ultimately it gave the impression that one went there for the success. It couldn't have been. We do have the team on the ground that is doing the work daily. There's a port commander there. There was not necessarily a need for me to go there for that purpose. So I went there to address exactly what Letlohonolo is saying, and I want to put it this way. So we have been having incidences that were worrying us as the leadership of the Border Management Authority. And those are instances where buses get intercepted inside the country, and those buses are found having illegal people or illegal migrants or people without documents in those particular buses. And now, the Letlohonolo explicitly talks about the bus that was intercepted down in Bloemfontein on the 2nd of April. That is just a day before Good Friday. We have spoken a bit in length about that, and I can go to the technical details of that, but I don't think we have time for that. The only thing that I can say is we were able to demonstrate, even through footage and every other thing, that that bus, when it arrived in Beitbridge, the colleagues did every other thing by the book. Every other person that was in that bus complied with every other thing. They had all the passports. We have already confirmed that even arising from that particular bus, the driver himself had all of the documents required, whether it's the cross-border permit in terms of the bus that he was actually driving. And we know that bus is operated by one of the biggest operators called Rimbitos. Like I'm saying, I can give all the details if those are actually needed, but the issue of time will be a problem. The only thing I can say is that bus came through, we have the footage, and that bus was not overloaded. And when that bus arrived at that particular port, did not have any person who did not have any documents. So that particular bus went into the Beitbridge immediately after everything was done in the port. In the Beitbridge, that particular bus passed all the processes. It was not overloaded. Everything went according to reality. Now, the Border Management Authority's work is at port and 20-kilometer radius from the port inland. If you talk Beitbridge, in terms of the stretch from Musina backwards into the port, that is the border law enforcement area. Now, if somebody enters the country and end up picking up people along the way and end up being found in Bloemfontein, that is a concern for the BMA, because people then want BMA to answer. But the reality of it is, this is a driver that has opted to malfunction whilst in the country and ended up picking people out of the port. And that is the problem. So that was our concern. When we thought that was the only issue, the 18th of May, another bus got intercepted in Polokwane. And once again, the same bus, we went to the port, we look at the footage, we saw everybody coming out of the bus. There were 22, everything complied and every other thing, but they get intercepted in Polokwane with 70-something people, whilst they pass through the port at 22. Now, again, it becomes a problem because it comes back to the BMA, and that is the reality. When we thought that was done, on the 19th, 2 taxis got intercepted, once again in Polokwane. That is when I then said, colleagues, we need to do something about this, because in as much as these things are happening inland, we cannot just ignore it. Where did these people come from? And that is basically the context. That is what gave rise to us going into the port. What did we have to do? We called all the stakeholders. Your colleagues were there in terms of all the media houses yesterday. We were engaging across all the stakeholders. We had the head, what is called the HOD, head of department from Limpopo, responsible for safety, responsible for transportation and everything else was in that meeting. We had the municipal traffic. We had the provincial traffic. We had everybody else, whether it's the police, whether it is SNDF, whether it is SARS, whether it's everybody, including the cross-border road transport agency. And we engaged. And the key issue was we need to work together to understand where are these people coming from so that we can be able to deal with this issue. Because again, it gives an impression that there are people that are either entering the country through the bushes or probably through the rivers or anything like that, and they have a way to connect back with these vehicles and all of that. Now, without wasting time, let me tell you about the decision that we took yesterday to deal with this particular issue. And the reason we took this decision is because we agreed we must hold each other accountable as the ecosystem so that we are able to know where is the problem and where is the leakage. So number one, we used to have during festive period 2 key, I will say, roadblocks on the corridor, on the N1 out of Beitbridge. There is Matombo roadblock, 10 kilometers out of Beitbridge. It is just on the north of Musina, and that is where we'll then put the roadblock. We'll have the second one at the toll gate, which is called Baobab, 30 kilometers out of Musina. We'll have a roadblock there, and those roadblocks becomes fundamental in assisting us to be able to ensure that if anybody is leaked somewhere else, they get picked up there, because that is the main corridor that leads you into Louis Trichardt and ultimately into the country. Now, the only challenge is those roadblocks, you will find that they become more 24-hour during a hectic period. But in between, then those roadblocks then get relaxed, particularly the one at the toll gate at Baobab. Then we realize that we are not able to account properly about those people because that roadblock is not 24 hours. Because if it was 24 hours, we would be definitely sure these people were not picked up in Musina. It means they were picked up in Louis Trichardt or actually in Polokwane. If that is the case, then we need to be able to identify, have these people been in the country all this while, or they had a way to walk through the farms or anything like that and end up in Musina, in Louis Trichardt. If that is the case, how many kilometers? That's 90 kilometers. So we need to have empirical data to be able to know what is the problem statement. So what we agreed yesterday is from today, there's going to be a 24/7 roadblock at that particular toll gate, and that is at Baobab. And that is a multidisciplinary roadblock. It includes everybody, the provincial traffic in terms of Limpopo, the Musina traffic, which is the localized ones, as well as cross-border road transport agency, including the Road Traffic Management Corporation, which is RTMC. The border guards are going to be there, SNDF is going to be there, SAPS is going to be there, and the rest of the other stakeholders, so that we can get to understand what is actually going on, because that is very much fundamental. So that is one thing that we've decided on. Number two, we agreed that we are no longer going to accept manifest, what is called a passenger manifest that is handwritten. A passenger manifest is the list of all the people that are in the bus. So when you do interjurisdictional travel, even when you do local travel, the driver must have the list of all the passengers so that he can be able to account in case there's an accident. Those people, that paper must be able to indicate how many people were in the bus, what is their names, and all of those issues. Now, we've been accepting handwritten manifests because we understand it's Africa, our people, and what. But the problem is the drivers, they get correct numbers of people, they have a proper manifest, but what they do, they go and put people in the bus for their own sake. So they charge them for themselves, not even for the company. And then they add people on the manifest with a pen because the manifest is handwritten. So we decided it has to be typed manifest, and those are some of the intervention. The third issue, we've agreed that all buses, when they exit Beitbridge, all of them are going to be compelled to go to the weighbridge. Before now, those buses were going there through a sampling model, which were just identified by Sandral on the corridor and take them to the weighbridge. Now we want every bus that enters South Africa to be accounted for in the weighbridge, so that when there is an issue inland, we are able to account for every bus in terms of weighbridge. Those are the agreements. Fourthly, we also agreed that all the cross-border permits has to be verified through electronic means. The Cross-Border Road Transport Agency confirmed they are going to be giving us access to their system, and they're going to train the border guards to make sure that all the cross-border permits that are brought into the port, we are able to verify them electronically in terms of their validity. Because we had a situation where people will bring in a paper that looks like a cross-border permit, and those things are handwritten. It becomes very difficult to be able to do verification. So effectively, you will then have people that do not necessarily have a proper authorization to move people around. But because they bring paper that cannot be verified electronically, you end up having to believe the paper and allow people to move people, only to find that it is an illegal transporter. That is what we have agreed. We are no longer going to be doing exactly that. So the third issue is we've also agreed that we're going to set up teams to patrol all the arteries, all the other roads that are actually around Musina, where people can actually try to divert and avoid coming through on the N1, so that we're able to make sure that all those areas are closed. And this is the agreement that we set yesterday, and we've agreed that we're going to implement all of them to make sure that we deal with all these issues. The deployment of the drones, particularly the night vision, because some of the people that were interviewed in the taxis were citing issues about being in some boat up on the western corridor of Beitbridge, and on that particular basis went through the farms and all of those kind of issues. So on that basis, we need to then expand or extend our footprint, even in terms of the coverage, in terms of the night drone vision, so that we can be able to also see those other particular areas. And of course, what is the long-term view? The long-term view is what the minister had said, rolling out of EMCS 2.0 with facial recognition, so that we can move away from these papers, passports and stuff, and start using a biometric, which is the face, because our faces cannot be the same. So that becomes fundamental to move people into the country, so that we are accountable for every other individual in terms of dealing with all of these issues. The last thing that I want to say, for the purposes of completion, in that meeting yesterday, we then brought the presidents, two presidents who came with their own executives, the president of International Cross-Border Taxi Organization, and that president came with all the executives, together with the president of what is called the International Cross-Border Bus Association. So they came through, and we told them they must work with us. If any of their drivers, any of their operators actually malfunctions in the value chain, those particular people must be fired. From where we are sitting now, we put it very clear, even through the ecosystem, that all those drivers are going to be arrested, charged for aiding and abetting. And that is going to even happen inland. And inland is not done by BMA, but it has to be done by the traffic authorities that stop the people, to the extent that even the buses themselves has to be impounded. One thing that we realized yesterday when we discussed is that they actually impound a bus and they charge them 500. So they come and swap the 500 and they take the bus. So we're looking at other stringent measures to make sure that the owners of these buses are able to hold their drivers accountable. Because at the end of the day, if these people keep on being intercepted in the country with illegal people, it gives an impression that we don't know what we are doing. And that is why we had to have this meeting yesterday, to make sure that we close all these loopholes. And we said to everybody else in the ecosystem, we are going to be monitoring all these activities. And if there will be any other interception, we must be able to follow through on the decisions and make sure that we understand where the lapse was, so that we can be able to hold each other accountable. The minister talks about consequence management, and on that basis, it means if technocratically we are not able to hold people accountable, therefore it means that he will be able to hold us as leadership accountable. And that is why we have to make sure that we are able to understand what is going on. And therefore, we cannot continue with illegal migration that get facilitated without us not having any empirical data to understand what actually has transpired. So that is the response in terms of Letlogonolo's question. And the only thing that we can indicate is that we are doing our best. We have over 6 corridors plus in the country. We have the N4 corridor that comes from Lebombo. We never had any issues there, no interception. We have N11 corridor that comes from Groblersdal in the western corridor, coming from Botswana. No interception on the corridor, no issues. We have the N8 that comes in the central from Maseru, from Fixbeck, no interception, no any other issue. Why do we always have issues with Beitbridge? And that is why we're very much clear, even to the leadership of Beitbridge Port themselves, to say we have to make sure that we clean out the system and make sure that we give South Africans confidence that we know what we are doing in as far as border management is concerned. I took some bit of time, but we had to get this addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Minister, once again. I don't see any hands in the room. Let me take this opportunity to thank all the attendees. We had to wake up very early to come through to this media briefing, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the BMA, on behalf of the Ministry of Home Affairs. The media briefing is adjourned.
Thank you. You said
Get the small mic. Get the small mic. Against my monkey.
Oh, yeah, because I sent you.
Who will at the time?
Again.
Okay.
Okay.